Alright guys, and welcome back, and in today's video we will be reacting to Bleacher Report's new article about one trade that makes sense for every team before the 2025 NFL trade deadline, which is tomorrow, Tuesday, and deadline's at 4 Eastern. Alright, let's get right into things. Starting off with the AFC East, they have the Buffalo Bills acquiring defensive tackle Sebastian Joseph-Day from the Titans. Honestly, I don't hate the move. I think the Bills can upgrade their defense in many ways. I think their defense has been pretty lackluster this season. So I think the main issue is the run defense, and I think Sebastian Joseph-Day helps that a lot. I think they should also be looking for secondary help. I think Cole Bishop's had his best game against the Chiefs yesterday, but I think that the safety tandem can use some work, and I think they can use some better corners as well. So I don't hate the idea of them upgrading their defense. I like this move. Next up, we have the Dolphins trading Jaelen Phillips for a day 2 draft pick, which already happened this morning, and I think that was a good move for the Dolphins. They got the third round pick from the Philadelphia Eagles, and I think the Dolphins be trying to get as much draft capital as possible for this draft because it seems like they're blowing up their team. They just fired a GM, Chris Greer, and Mike McDaniel can be on the way out soon. So getting as much draft picks for the next regime is the A+ for me. Next up, we have the New England Patriots acquiring wide receiver Jakobi Meyers from the Raiders. And I think Jakobi Meyers obviously has familiarity with Josh McDaniels and the New England Patriots. The NFL is based off connections if you think about it. A lot of players go to places where they have connections and where they have familiarity with the coaches. And I think Josh McDaniels got the best out of Jakobi Meyers. And I think that you should be going all in with the rookie quarterback on a rookie contract. And with how well Drake May's been playing, I think Jakobi Meyers is the do-it-all receiver. So I like this trade for the Patriots. And then lastly, for the AFC East, we have the Jets trading Jermaine Johnson for a day 2 draft pick. I think he is similar value to Jaelen Phillips, who was traded for a third round pick. I could very well see that happening. I've seen the Niners as one of the teams interested in edge rushers and the Dallas Cowboys. And like it says down here, the team seems like they're focused on Will McDonald up front. And Jermaine Johnson is in an option year. They have depth at that position. And I also don't hate this move as well. So far, it's a good start to the article. Alright, moving on, we have the AFC North. We have the Baltimore Ravens trading tight end Mark Andrews to the Rams for a middle round draft pick. I think the Ravens are unlikely to bring back Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely. And I would like to see Isaiah Likely as like a full-on tight end 1. But I like this move a lot for the Rams. If you can get it for a 5th round draft pick potentially, I don't hate it at all. I think it opens up the offense. I think the Rams tight end core has a lot of youth in it with Terrence Ferguson. But they can use a veteran like how they're using Davante Adams right now to get open, and I think it opens up the offense even more. Imagine the offense with Matthew Stafford, Kyron Williams, Puka, Davante Adams, and Mark Andrews. I think that's damn near unstoppable. So I don't hate the idea for both sides. It would suck for the Ravens to trade Mark Andrews, who's like the franchise leader in certain stats, but if you're not going to bring him back, you might as well get something for him, so I don't mind it. Next up, we have the Bengals trading linebacker Logan Wilson to the Colts for cornerback Chris Lamons. And I think this is just a meh trade. Logan Wilson requested a trade. That whole Bengals defense should be traded with how bad their performances have been the past 2 weeks and dating back to last season. If you're getting off a player on your defense and trying to get someone else from a different defense, it's worth a shot, but it doesn't really move me. And next up, we have the Browns trading David Njoku for a middle round draft pick. I don't hate the idea. I really like the Browns rookie tight end Harold Fannin Jr. I think he oozes the potential. I think he can be a solid tight end. I think he's only 21 years old, and it looks like he's the future of that position in Cleveland, like it says down here. I was reading articles earlier today about how the Browns aren't even looking to really trade David Njoku, and they're looking to be more buyers, which I don't hate the idea of. If you have a good player like David Njoku, if you're not wanting to trade him, you can never have too much good players at a position. Njoku mentoring Harold Fannin for the first couple years of his career. And if you get a 3rd round pick, which I don't think you will get for David Njoku, I would do it. But anything less than that, I'm good. I'll rather just keep him. I like how the Browns are potential buyers looking for young players that are disgruntled. But altogether, I wouldn't do this for the Browns. Next up, you have the Pittsburgh Steelers acquiring wide receiver Chris Olave from the Saints. I think this is the pipe dream for the Steelers. I just don't see how the Steelers can pay Chris Olave and DK Metcalf. I think Chris Olave is going to want similar money to DK Metcalf. He looks at DK Metcalf and says, why can't I? I like the option of Rashid Shaheed here. I just think that that's just another deep threat. They already have DK Metcalf and Calvin Austin as their deep threats. I like the idea of them getting Jakobi Meyers, and I've seen the reports of them being very interested in him. I think he's a do-it-all that can get open pretty fast, and I think he's a very underrated receiver with the Jakobi Meyers. I think you have to get less than him. I think that if you're trading for Chris Olave, you're giving up a 2 or potentially a first round pick, which I don't think the Steelers are wanting to do. I think they want to save their draft picks to trade for a quarterback next year. I think you can get Jakobi Meyers for potentially a fourth round pick, and I like that more. I think it fits the Steelers better. But altogether, if the Steelers could pull it off, it would be pretty nice. But I just don't think they're in the business to trade a top pick with their quarterback uncertainty next year. But I don't hate it for the Saints. All right, moving on to the AFC South. You have the Houston Texans acquiring offensive lineman Jackson Powers-Johnson from the Raiders. I saw earlier yesterday that the Raiders are potentially listening to calls on Jackson Powers-Johnson. He was one of my favorite prospects coming out of the draft last year. He was only 22, like it says, and the Texans would be smart to see if they get a change of scenery and get back on track. I think that the Texans should be swinging on upside with the offensive line. I think that their offensive line's abysmal, and if they can get a franchise center guard who's only 22 with all the tools he has, I think he can very well be the franchise center or guard for that team. It just depends on the price, and I don't know how to gauge the price for him. I could very well see the Raiders asking for a lot because he's only 22 and flashes to be a really good center or guard. Put him, but if I'm not mistaken, Pete Carroll and John Spytek came in this offseason, so they really didn't draft him. So if they really don't like him, I wouldn't be surprised if they try to move off of him. But if I was the Raiders, I wouldn't do this. But Texans, they for sure should be calling the Raiders for Jackson Powers-Johnson. All right, next up we have the Indianapolis Colts acquiring cornerback Tariq Woolen from the Seahawks. I feel like Tariq Woolen's been in the league forever. He's only 26, and the Colts have been rumored to be calling teams about defense. And with the depth of corners with Seattle, Devon Witherspoon and Josh Jobe and Nick Emanwari, it seems Tariq Woolen's expendable. And I thought he's had a very good rookie season, but the last couple seasons it's been lackluster. But he has the size, speed, and weight to be a lockdown corner. I think he's 6'4", 200 plus pounds, and runs a blazing 40. So I don't mind the Colts swinging on the upside. I think that they can use upgrades at defense in pretty much all three levels. So I don't hate this for the Colts. And I can see why the Seahawks would trade Tariq Woolen. Next up, the Jacksonville Jaguars acquire edge Jaelen Phillips from the Dolphins. I wish I recorded this earlier because, like I said, Jaelen Phillips was already traded. And I don't see why the Jaguars would trade for an edge rusher. They already invested a lot of money into Josh Allen and a first overall pick in Travon Walker a couple of years ago. And I see they would want them to maybe go for Jermaine Johnson, but I don't see why they would trade for an edge rusher. I guess you can never have too much edge rushers, but I feel like you're investing way too much into one position when you have more holes on your team and defense altogether. Next up, you have the Tennessee Titans trading edge rusher Arden Key for a middle round draft pick. If you can get a 5th or 6th for Arden Key, I don't hate it. I think he's quality depth, still 29, near the tail end of his prime. The Titans are obviously in a rebuild mode and just trying to develop Cam Ward. Like it says right down here, it won't impact Cam Ward. So I've seen rumors of them potentially trading Calvin Ridley, and I don't think that would be a good idea for the Titans. I don't like this trade as long as they can not affect Cam Ward's development and get picks back for next year and build their team through the draft. I don't hate it, so I'm fine with this trade. All right, next up, the AFC West. You have the Broncos acquiring wide receiver Chris Olave from the Saints. Once again, you just paid Courtland Sutton like wide receiver 1 money. I guess Bo Nix is on a rookie contract, so you could very well go all in. Obviously, Chris Olave has familiarity with Sean Payton. If I'm not mistaken, I feel like they overlap for at least 1 year. It seems like there's been a couple of trades with the Saints with the Broncos about Sean Payton reacquiring some of the players that he coached in New Orleans, but I think this would take the Broncos offense over the top. I thought the Broncos offense was pretty solid last year, but it's been lackluster. I think it's an all-in move, push the chips in the table and try to win the AFC West this year, with the Chiefs kind of messing around this year and the Chargers losing both offensive tackles. There's 2 starting offensive tackles in Joe Alt and Rashawn Slater. I think this is the perfect time for the Broncos to try to win the AFC West and go far in the playoffs. So I don't hate this idea, but I just don't see the likelihood of that happening. I don't even think the Saints are going to trade Chris Olave in the first place. Next up, you have the Chiefs acquiring running back Breece Hall from the Jets. I think the Chiefs should be in the market for a running back. I think they should try to trade for Breece Hall. The Chiefs' picks are going to be late in the round, so I don't hate the idea of trading a late 3rd. I would try to trade a 4th for a running back. Breece Hall is on an expiring deal. From reports, the Jets are not looking to trade Breece Hall more recently than earlier in the season. They have running backs Braylon Allen, who's on IR, and Isaiah Davis, 2 young running backs who they could like. I think Breece Hall is still very young, and with the rebuilding of the Jets, it would suck to trade young quality players who have been successful. So I don't hate the idea for the Jets. You could use the draft capital and invest it into a position that matters more. And I don't hate the idea for the Chiefs. I think their offense is a little lackluster, especially their rushing attack. I also wouldn't mind if the Chiefs tried to call about Seahawks running back Kenneth Walker. I don't hate the idea for both sides, and I would not mind if the Chiefs acquire a premier running back during the deadline. All right, next up we have the Las Vegas Raiders acquiring quarterback Anthony Richardson from the Colts. They just paid Geno Smith this offseason, and it's blown up. It says right down here, the Geno Smith experience has blown up in the Raiders' face. He's throwing a lot of turnovers and interceptions. So I don't hate the idea of them swinging on the upside of Anthony Richardson. It's just, do I trust them to develop a quarterback with the lack of weapons they have on offense right now? Not really. He is 23, so he has a lot of time to grow. And a lot of these quarterbacks that don't work out for the first couple of years come back and have a resurgence like Daniel Jones, Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold. So I don't hate the idea. The Raiders, I don't think Geno Smith is the franchise quarterback for that team. And taking the upside of Anthony Richardson, I'm fine with it. And then lastly, for the AFC West, we have the Chargers acquiring running back Breece Hall from the Jets. I don't really like the idea of the Chargers acquiring a running back at the deadline. I think the running backs have been fine. I think Kamani Vidal has surprised people. He's still really young. You're getting Amari Hampton back in probably 2 to 3 weeks after their bye in week 13. I just don't think you should be training for that premier of a running back in Breece Hall. I know Hassan Haskins just went on the IR, so you're lacking depth. Maybe you could trade for a running back. I like the idea of Jerome Ford. I think he's a very good pass-catching back, and the Browns have room to trade running backs. They have Quinshon Judkins and Dylan Sampson, so trading for Jerome Ford, probably a late-round pick swap. I don't hate the idea of that, but I think that trading for Breece Hall wouldn't make any sense. I think the future of Breece Hall and Amari Hampton would be a crowded running back room. And the fact that you're probably going to have to give a third-round pick for him, it just makes no sense for the Chargers. All right, moving on to the NFC East. We have the Dallas Cowboys acquiring edge rusher Jermaine Johnson from the Jets. In the first place, they should have never traded Micah Parsons, but they have 2 first-round picks now out of it. Their defense is abysmal once again. But I don't hate the idea of the Dallas Cowboys acquiring defense at any position, corners, safeties, linebackers, defensive line. Their defense is one of the worst in the league. Throwing a middle round pick on a young edge rusher like Jermaine Johnson, who was drafted in 2022, if I'm not mistaken. I don't hate the idea of it. They need pass rush on that D-line, obviously. They just traded one of the best pass rushers in the league. And it seems like Jerry Jones wants to acquire an edge rusher. They've been rumored to be looking at defense during the trade deadline. So I don't hate the idea. Honestly, I think Jermaine Johnson is a very solid edge rusher in the middle of his prime right now. Next up, you have the New York Giants trading edge rusher Kayvon Thibodeau to the Panthers for running back Chuba Hubbard and draft capital. Honestly, I don't see this happening at all. You see reports that the Kayvon Thibodeau is not going to be traded during the trade deadline most likely. And it's like another situation like Jalen Waddle where they have to be blown away with the offer. And it would make no sense to me. The Giants spent all this past couple of years and all of the investments into their defensive line. Why would they trade it away? I feel like one of the positions where you can never have too much is the defensive line. They have 3 really good pass rushers in Brian Burns, Thibodeau, and Abdul Carter they drafted most recently. And Abdul Carter's still on his rookie contract for another 4 years after this year. So you could pay Thibodeau some decent money, and I think that would be a really good trio of pass rushers. And trading for Chuba Hubbard, I don't hate the idea of that, but it just depends on what other draft capital you get. And I just don't think the Panthers are in the room to trade their draft capital for another player. I think they should be building through the draft. So I don't like this trade for both sides, honestly. Next up, we have the Philadelphia Eagles acquiring edge rusher Trey Henderson from the Bengals. It seems like every single trade deadline, Howie Roseman's on the phones trying to work deals and make a splash move to try to catapult them to another back-to-back Super Bowl. They already traded for Michael Carter, and they traded for Jaelen Phillips this morning. I wouldn't hate them trying to trade for Trey Henderson, but it seems like the Bengals want a first-round pick, and they don't really want to trade him. But I think the Eagles could be using pass rush. I know that Brandon Graham just came out of retirement. But like I said earlier, you can never have too much pass rush, and I think Trey Henderson is one of the best pass rushers in the league. So I wouldn't hate this idea if they didn't already trade for Jaelen Phillips. But, yeah, it just makes no sense now. And then lastly, the Commanders acquiring wide receiver Jakobi Meyers from the Raiders. Like I said, I would love this trade if yesterday didn't happen. Unfortunately, Jaden Daniels most likely is going to be out for the rest of the season. He had a fractured elbow, if I'm not mistaken. It was a gruesome injury. So it looks like the Commanders are just going to be the sellers at the deadline this year and take this as a gap year. You most likely have your franchise quarterback in Jaden Daniels, but you just can't compete this year with Marcus Mariota, unfortunately. So if beforehand I would love them to go all in this year, you have injuries with Terry McLaurin, and you've had injury history with Deebo Samuel, so trading for another receiver doesn't hurt, and he's under contract still. So having three good receivers, in case one of them goes down, wouldn't be the worst idea. But like I said, with the injury to Jaden Daniels, it makes no sense. All right, next up we have the NFC North. We have the Bears acquiring offensive lineman Evan Neal from the Giants. I love this for the Giants. Giants fans are all over Twitter wanting Evan Neal off their team. I think it would just be good for Evan Neal, honestly. I think a change of scenery can help. He was drafted top 10. He's not a premier offensive tackle, obviously, but later on in his career, he could become a solid average to above average offensive tackle or guard. It's worth the shooting on the upside of Evan Neal. He's still pretty young, and the Bears acquiring him, I don't hate it. Braxton Jones on the IR. Theo Benedict has had issues at left tackle. There's reason for the Bears to be looking to acquire offensive line. They should be looking for someone better than Evan Neal, but I don't hate the idea of shooting on upside. I would like this trade for the Giants, but the Bears, not really. Next up, the Detroit Lions acquire edge rusher Trey Henderson from the Bengals. This is, like I said, the Detroit Lions pipe dream. Having Trey Hendrickson and Aiden Hutchinson would pretty much catapult you to the best edge rushing duo in the league. It's up there for sure. And like it says down here, that Jaelen Phillips or Jermaine Johnson wouldn't be a bad option as well. That could be your second option, minus Phillips, who was traded. If they can trade a first-round pick or somehow pull off a second-round pick to get Trey Hendrickson, they should be all in this year. I think it's the perfect year to be all in. I think all their players are in the middle of their primes. All of them just got paid. It's going to be hard for the Lions to build a competitive roster later on. But I don't hate the idea of this at all. I think this makes their defense over the top dominant. It's already a pretty solid defense. So I love this idea for the Lions and the Bengals. You've shown that you don't want to pay him. Might as well get something for him. All right, next up you have the Packers acquiring defensive tackle Sebastian Joseph-Day from the Titans. Once again, the Packers, I think they can use depth on the defensive line. I think their defense is pretty good, honestly, right now. But like I said, defensive line is one of the positions where you can never have too much depth. And especially with trading away Kenny Clark, their defensive tackle, but to get Micah Parsons, which is a no-brainer. They lack defensive tackle depth, and I think they stopped the run pretty well already. You can never have too much, so I don't hate the idea. It's probably a late-round pick swap for him, so honestly, I'm in it for the Packers. All right, and the last one for the NFC North, you have the Vikings acquiring Alontae Taylor from the Saints. The Vikings defense this year has been confusing. I like to say it's a top 3, top 5 defense. It's been like that for some games, and other games have been very lackluster. But I don't think it's the secondary is the issue. Isaiah Rodgers has been fantastic this year. Byron Murphy Jr. has been very solid. I don't hate the idea of Alontae Taylor. The Saints should be looking to trade their players that aren't part of their future. And I don't think it'll be too much for Alontae Taylor, who's still pretty young. And I think he's on one of the last years of his contracts. Honestly, you can never have too much cornerback depth, so I would say just do it for the Vikings. All right, next up, you have the NFC South. We have the Atlanta Falcons trading quarterback Kirk Cousins to the Vikings for a late-round draft pick. I think it makes perfect sense for both sides, but I think that I've seen reports that the Falcons don't really want to trade Kirk Cousins, especially with the uncertainty of how Michael Penix has been playing. He's been playing solid as of recently, and they invested a high pick into him, so I think they're giving him time. The Vikings have been rumored to be looking for a backup quarterback with Carson Wentz's injury and J.J. McCarthy's uncertainty with his injury history. But I just don't know. Kirk Cousins obviously has familiarity with the Vikings, that big contract. I don't know how or who's going to take on the money of that. I'm assuming the Falcons will. I think the Falcons should just wait to cut Kirk Cousins until it doesn't affect their cap space that much. But I don't hate the idea of the Vikings trading for a backup quarterback. But I don't really like this move for the Falcons. I think they should keep a premier backup quarterback. Next up, we have the Panthers. We already discussed this trade. I don't like it for either sides, honestly. Maybe a little bit more for the Panthers because I think they can use edge help. But nah, it just doesn't make sense regarding the rumors that we've already heard about the Giants not looking to trade Kayvon Thibodeau. Next up, we have the New Orleans Saints trading wide receiver Rashid Shaheed to the Steelers for a late-round draft pick. Like I said earlier, I just don't think it's a really good fit for the Steelers. I think they already have their deep threats, but if Shaheed's not part of your future plans, the Saints should be like certain other teams where they're trying to trade their players not part of their future for draft picks. And I think you could probably get a 4th or 5th round pick for Shaheed, which I would take. He's only 27. He's shown to be a very solid receiver, and he's slated to become a free agent. So, Saints get something out of it. I don't hate it for the Saints. The Steelers, I think there's better fits out there, but if that's all you can get at receiver, I don't hate it. All right, and the last one for the NFC South, the Buccaneers acquiring linebacker Logan Wilson from the Bengals. Like I said earlier, I expect Logan Wilson to be traded at the deadline. The Bengals defense is abysmal. He's already requested a trade, and it's probably a late-round pick swap. I don't hate the idea of this. I think the Bengals should be trying to swing on younger players that are disgruntled at this deadline on the defensive side and just swing on the upside. So I think getting away their aging players. I think Logan Wilson's still pretty young. The Bucs could use linebacker depth. I think behind Levante David, it's pretty lackluster, and with how old Levante David is, they don't have their franchise linebacker, and Logan Wilson could be that, which just helps with the injuries with how old their linebacker room is. So I don't hate it for either side, honestly. It's another good trade. All right, and lastly for the NFC West, we have the Cardinals acquiring running back Breece Hall from the Jets. I don't see why the Cardinals should do this. I really want them to give Trey Benson the workload, and I think he's coming back this week, if I'm not mistaken. It seems like James Conner's probably done with the Cardinals, and they have depth at running backs with Bam Knight and Amari DiMercado. I don't think the Cardinals have the business to trade a third-round pick for him. But, yeah, I just want the Cardinals to give Trey Benson a full workload as running back one and see how he fares out for the rest of the season. Next up, we have the Rams. I don't hate it for both sides, honestly. And then for the 49ers, we have them acquiring edge rusher Trey Hendrickson from the Bengals. The 49ers, let's not be mistaken, they're not afraid to make a big move. A couple trade deadlines ago, they traded for Christian McCaffrey. And the 49ers are very good at finding late-round studs in the draft, so trading like a first-round pick to probably near the end of the draft wouldn't be that bad. You're getting Trey Hendrickson, who's 30 or 31, still a little bit in his prime, still one of the best edge rushers in the league. I want to see Trey Hendrickson on a good defense and see how he looks, especially on a team where he's a chance to win. And I honestly don't hate it for the Niners. Michael Williams now is out for the season with an ACL. Nick Bosa is as well, but fully healthy Trey Hendrickson, Nick Bosa, and Michael Williams, I don't hate it at all. The only thing, that worries me a little bit is that, like I said, Michael Williams should be the future pass rusher of that team, and you already have Nick Bosa, so you already have two premier players that you invested a lot in. If they're really trying to go all in this year, their window's kind of closing, I don't hate this idea. And then lastly, the Seahawks acquire guard Kevin Zeitler from the Titans. I think the Seahawks offensive line looked pretty solid last night, but Kevin Zeitler's a little bit older, but still one of the premier guards in the league, and you're probably getting him on a one-year rental. Maybe he plays next season. The Titans obviously aren't competing, but the Seahawks look like a legit team and trading for a pretty solid guard. Like they said, Anthony Bradford's been a problem. I don't hate this at all for both sides. Another really good trade. All right, and that wraps up the Bleacher Report article. This is a very solid article. A lot of these trades were pretty good, and I can't wait to see up until tomorrow at 4 o'clock the trades that go down. It seems like every single year that the trade deadline gets better and there's more deals done. I'm a little worried that this trade deadline that it's all talk, and I don't think certain players like Jalen Waddle or Chris Olave and Trey Henderson, I don't think any of them are really going to get traded. But you never know. There's always a shocking deal that happens during the trade deadline. Comment down below one deal that you want your team to make, and let me know what you think about these certain trades in the article. I'll link it down below. And stay tuned for next video.